Yes, hello. Let's move on. Yes, hello. My name is Felix, and I'm a geospatial developer. I work for the British Antarctic Survey, but I also volunteer with Map Action, who are the stand outsider and a volunteer. Sorry, and I have a sponsor for the event. So if you have any questions on that from the software side, I'm happy to talk about that as well. I should warn that I've put quite a lot in this, so I may have to talk quite quickly, but I'm more than happy to go through things in slower time afterwards. For those that don't know, the British Antarctic Survey effectively provide the UK presence in Antarctica, so that's a lot of science, but it's also logistics. So we have 5 main research stations scattered about, and one in the Arctic, bunch of aircraft, and the Citadel of Attenborough, which was famously almost boating with Boatface. Thankfully, the crew don't have to go by that name, so they're relieved about that. I work within the geospatial team at BAS with probably the best acronym of MAGIC, which means my boss is head of magic, which works quite well. We're effectively the internal geospatial and geomatics team, helping obviously with all things spatial. That includes big production level maps that you can go and buy in shops, drone surveys of one of our stations for planning purposes, and a big area that one of my colleagues is involved in is using satellite and aerial imagery to count basically any kind of wildlife. I'm not actually sure if those are seals or penguins, but one of them, he's done them all. So yeah, range of scales. MAGIC also maintain the spatial data infrastructure for BAS, summarised but not really readable in this diagram. And this talk is actually focused on one bit of that, which is this data catalogue box, and that's really the bit that I know about. This has had quite a potted history. It started, well, a decade ago, when I worked for a different bit of BAS, where we were trying to replace a system that handled grants funded data sets and make those available to people. It was in a very old system. We wanted to move away, partly because it was based on Oracle, which no one liked. And we also wanted to change metadata standards, something that actually everyone else uses, so that was a sort of big motivation, but also include data from other bits of BAS to try and make it a bit more useful for people to find information. We trialled all of the sort of common community source, at least at the time, so the CCAN, GeoNetwork, etc. A big problem sort of off the bat was obviously maps don't really look great for Antarctica when it's Web Mercator, so everyone was immediately like, no, those need to change. Running some other tests with our sort of people that actually write records came out with this fairly damning quote of that they'd rather write the XML by hand than use the tool, which didn't really sell it particularly. But looking around a bit more, we found this MD editor, which is, I need to remember the acronym, the Alaska Data Integration Working Group, which works pretty well, but it only did, it is only an editor, so it didn't give us the sort of front-end catalogue that we needed. So the plan was combine that with CCAN, which does do that part, and sort of customise the template a bit to make it fit together. However, I then moved team and went and worked on some other stuff for a while. But while sort of being there, I was overhearing some fairly similar conversations in terms of, you know, people asking, do we have data over here? What license is it under? And lots of emails coming in saying, do you have a map of your stations? And it was sort of, okay, we need to find a better way of distributing this information and making it discoverable. So as an experiment, we came up with a very limited catalogue for a single project at the time. Didn't follow any proper project management. It was very agile in the sense that it was as much as I could do in 4 days. And see where we got to. It did have some hard constraints, so it needed to be Python-based, and it did need to align with the ISO 19115 model. So we didn't completely abandon all sort of structure. Record authoring was really rough, including manual new lines in JSON files, for example, which, again, the author doing it wasn't particularly pleased with me about. But despite that, it did prove successful, and we got buy-in to expand it into a fuller catalogue for our maps and data. So jumping ahead to now, We have a bunch of things at sort of various degrees of that I'm happy with. We have a static catalog that's built using Python. We have a JSON schema for ISO 11115, a Python library to help with that and do two-way conversion and validation, a very experimental editor, which is an addition to MD Editor. And usefully, we have lots of maps catalogued. We have some data sets as well, and some of those are kind of automatically generated. That's a list of things that it does, which I'll talk about in a minute. This is a high-level overview of sort of how it's put together. There is, I don't know if the mouse moves. Yeah, I think you can see. So effectively, there's a record repository which is based in GitLab, and then the catalog will either store records into that or pull them out and generate a static site from them. Everything is a record, which align with the ISO standard, but they're then sort of derived into items for the various types of things, and those let us add sort of derived properties that are just useful to pull information out, so the abstract in Markdown or in HTML or in plain text, for example. That's actually what it looks like. So the left image is a collection, in this case, of geological maps. On the right is a single data set, not related. There's obviously a dark mode because that's trendy. They are based, everything's based on a kind of common template. So they have, title, summary, and then a series of tabs. But depending on the type of thing you're looking at, obviously there are different tabs. So on the data set, there is a data tab, etc. I should say that a lot of this is based on or heavily inspired by the data.gov.uk site. This is a bit of a silly slide, but there it also exposes the information obviously in the underlying metadata formats. Our custom JSON format, which I'll come back to, standard XML, and then a XML style sheet, which I didn't write to make that slightly more human readable if you're particularly interested in it. And there's a web accessible folder for grabbing that programmatically. At the moment, we don't support any kind of dynamic support. Big thing that we had to support for were physical maps. So it knows, for example, this record is two-sided. It's a trio of records underneath. And that lets us say things like, well, one side of this has this projection, the other side has another. And there are aggregations between those to sort of let you jump around. You can use Markdown formatting. That's obviously a really contrived record, but it's quite useful if you've got long abstracts. You can start subdividing things. Big feature, which sadly I can't take any credit for, are these extent maps, which do use Esri, so we'll gloss over that. But the aim is that no matter where your extent is or the size of it, you'll get a decent-ish representation of it, including, obviously, for those small areas, you'll have this locator globe that kind of goes, okay, I know roughly now where that random patch of what could be the moon looks like. And that's actually been spun out as a separate library now. So our public website now uses that, and anyone else can. It's public as well. We do have some restricted data, so the catalogue will sort of flag that to hopefully warn people that they probably won't be able to access it unless they're internal, and obviously sort of summary of licensing information for what they can and can't do for it. Whether they follow that, who knows. Everything is a git commit in terms of record updates. That's quite useful for us because we actually do pretty much all our work in GitLab, so Mac production as well. So it's quite easy then to just make cross-references to say, right, I'm doing this because of this issue, and it gives us that context. So jumping out, we have this ISO JSON schema. It's certainly not comprehensive. It's not always correct because it's sort of grown organically, but it aims to sort of be quite compact and not sort of lead to repetition of things. Again, fairly silly slide, but that's what it looks like as a high-level schema, and then an example of filling it in, but I'm sure you've all seen JSON, so that's not really relevant. There is a Python library that lets you convert, again, quite scrappy, but the useful thing is it lets you go two ways and does validation both of the JSON schema coming in and then against the ISO XSDs. I haven't added schematron support because I couldn't find a decent Python library for doing that. But if there is one, please let me know. that's an example of reading in an existing XML, getting it out to Python dict, converting back again. Something that I've added recently, because I'm now building records programmatically, is a set of Python data classes that let you sort of do that more easily. You get typing, you get enums, etc. And there are some things like filtering methods for if you've got lists of contacts or identifiers, you can quickly pull out the bits that you're interested in. So it's more quality of life. And then there's this experimental editor, which initially was a single text area on a page that helped with that new line problem. But it grew a bit because I wanted to learn some of these newfangled JavaScript frameworks. So settled on Vue for this and Playwright for some testing. It's really opinionated to what we need to do, but as a result, is quite efficient for people to write. At the moment, it only actually supports authoring, so it's write once. You can't actually edit an existing record. That is a problem, but it's one for later. That's what it looks like. Again, in dark mode, because I work on this at night, and it hurts my eyes if it's white. It's got some useful things, so they can just click checkboxes and get the information in. It does also give them the snippets of stuff, so if they are updating a record, they can just sort of grab a bit of config if they need it. It uses that same map library so that they can get a preview of where that thing is going to show up. And there are things like markdown previews and automatic citation formats. We've got a kind of bunch that people can pick from as well. There's even an AI summarizer in there, but that doesn't actually work properly. So there's no slide of that. And at the end, they can validate. If they're feeling very intellectual, they can try. This one's actually fairly easy to read, but most of them are unintelligible. So that's usually where they come to me and go, "Your tool doesn't work properly," because it is normally on me. So yeah. Some things, so that's where we are, some things we want to add, more stuff. It definitely needs some being able to search, restricted metadata. There's a big push now for security classifications. A lot of really what I'm saying is it's going to get, it's obviously tailored to our needs quite a bit. Two big things that I want to do are, as OGC records become more standardized, is base things on that, removing bits that I don't need to worry about, and when the ISO 19115-4, the JSON implementation comes out, that hopefully will replace our sort of custom one, and obviously newer standards like Stack, where we can incorporate those as well. I think this is it's the last slide. I just wanted to sort of summarize some challenges from this. One is obviously this takes quite a lot of time, but it's paid off internally at least because people like looking at it, and it's proving successful in people finding information they need, sort of self-service, so that's good. It's interesting how difficult it's been to get alignment between internal teams. So we still want to expand this out, but everyone is sort of on slightly different pages around that. So even within an organisation, it's quite hard to pull that together. The interoperability thing has been interesting. I mean, we're using an international standard, yet we're using things like GMX anchors, which are perfectly valid under that schema. But if you were to bring that into Arc or QGIS's metadata tool, it often just freaks out and goes, I don't know what these values are. So even within a standard, you've got to sort of obviously align that, and obviously profiles and stuff help with that. It's already out of date. We're not using the latest ISO standard, but given that one's kind of being renewed at the moment, I suspect we'll just wait for the new one. And then lastly, which is sort of a more negative point, but there you go, is effectively will AI make a lot of this sort of semantic structured work sort of not pointless as such, but we could just dump it all into a markdown document and have AI figure out and parsing this rather than lots of very manicured hierarchical structures, for example. So yeah, that may make some or all of that obsolete, but for now it's proving it's serving a need. So yeah, and then finally this is a list of where you can find at least most of the things I've just spoken about. Thank you so much.
That was a great talk. I always love to see a bit of a JSON editor, a bit of validation. I'd like to open if there are any questions. I certainly have a few. Okay, let me start. So the validation, is that just like a type validation, or do you have some internal schema in terms of property naming?
Both. I mean, it's based on a JSON schema. I forget the name, but there's a Python data JSON schema validator. So yes, that covers obviously the structure, the property names. For things that are enumerated, it will check those. There are some logical checks that if you were to import a record, that it runs just to make sure that you can add aliases to records, for example, and it will check, well, you can't name one that's already in there, for example. So schema can't help us with that, but yes, so there's some extra validation for that.
And did you write it yourself, or did you use like an open source like the Svelte vanilla JSON editor?
Largely, the actual JSON schema was written, basically, I wrote that.
The editor, the actual editor.
No, that's me. I was using it as a learning exercise for how to put these things together. Well, yes, until someone says, how do I edit something, and you say, you can't. But, that'll come in version 2, it's fine.
Does having the full range of longitudes and being down at the pole cause a lot of havoc, or
yes?
Yeah.
Yes, it's the bane of my life. If we were based in the equator, if we're based in the equator, half my job wouldn't exist. So that's a bit bad, but it would let us use obviously existing tools and stuff. I mean, fair to Esri, they're pretty good actually with their support for things. But yeah, it is often an annoying thing. And as someone that at university, when we did our projections module, thought, I never want to work anywhere where I have to deal with this, I have seemed to have ended up in the worst place. So thankfully, there's people that know the maths more than I do and can help with that. But, yeah.
So do you extend some of the open source projects to cope better with the cut line and so on? What's your relationship, say, with this community and having to deal with those issues?
Not usually in terms of extension. So we're takers rather than givers in that respect. I mean, all the things I was showing are built off, apart from the extent maps, are built off FOSS tools and they're released back. Where there are some sort of targeted things that we can give back, we have. And I have reported some just really generic things that aren't polar specific. But yeah, we haven't really gone down the road of we're going to really build out the polar support for something. I suspect if it was something that we used really heavily and did, then we would, but that situation hasn't really come up where it's been a kind of clean, oh yeah, we can give you this part. So. Hi.
Yeah, a kind of big picture question. You talked a bit about some of it is static site, some
yep.
of it is generated from GitLab, and some of it is kind of dynamically generated.
None of it's dynamically generated yet, but yeah.
My apologies.
That's right.
So how was that a kind of strategic decision to split between the kind of GitLab generated stuff and the static, or was it kind of practical? Or how did you go about?
Yes, so the GitLab just acts as a store. You don't ever see that directly. The main reason it was generated statically is that we had quite an unreliable internet connection at the time. And our static stuff just kept going down. So I wanted to make sure that we could have at least a minimal catalog that we could host in, I didn't mention actually, but the catalog's hosted in AWS, so that if we go down, that can stay. Now obviously we could run the compute and a dynamic version outside as well, but that gets into IT politics, which won't go into here. But yeah, so it was based as a sort of, well, at least this shouldn't fall over if our organisation does. It will expand out from that because we've already had things where there's metadata that can't be shared with people. So we'll need to have at least some way of gating it, and that will need obviously some kind of dynamic check. But yeah.
Cool, thanks.
You mentioned you use GitLab, so we're using GitHub, and especially like JSON and like large data set, we're not very happy with it. Have you evaluated others, and how happy are you with GitLab, and what size are we talking? Are we talking like gigabytes or terabytes of JSON as config?
Oh, for record, no, it's tiny. There's not that much. As I say, it ended up in there because we use it for most other things, mainly for issue tracking. I mean, the reason we ended up with GitLab instead of GitHub was at the time one of our engineers that was wintering south needed something, so he set it up locally because at the time we didn't have Starlink, so the internet was really painful. So it was a sort of historic accident that we ended up using GitLab. I suspect if we did it now, we would do it on GitHub instead. But I mean, it's nice that we can say, oh yeah, that's open source too, or at least open core. But yeah, so no pragmatic reason in that respect. Or yeah.
Do we have any more questions? Yes.
So the question is, so you've written a little bit about your basically versioning records and things like that. Have you done anything more on the versioning of the actual data and that sort of raw, crunchy side of things?
Yes and no. So some things, yes, they're heavily versioned and sort of controlled. Some things, no, because either they're spat out by a scientist who you talk to them about versioning and they have no idea what you're talking about, or so yeah, it's a range, basically.
Thank you, Felix.